Good afternoon. I will present some of the initial steps for INSPIRE directive development and more details about INSPIRE, current status, and individual components of INSPIRE. I will also present some information about the European Environment Agency and EUROGI partnership involvement in INSPIRE development process. So, probably you are aware of the situation that many users from governmental offices to different public administrations, research organizations, and citizens usually have access how to get different geospatial data. They are scattered around different organizations with unknown resources, unknown quality, and usually they need to ask maybe for the same data many times. On the other hand, in recent years, there is the increased request for more and more geospatial data from different communities and different sectors that could be used for the environmental assessment and analysis of the environmental policies. Now, this situation triggered the creation of the European Spatial Data Infrastructure, where the initial discussions how to set up such infrastructure started like 10 years ago, with initial identification of the thematic user needs for the environmental policies, with different workshops on specific issues like coordinate reference systems or geographical reference grid systems, and with the discussions what the technological basis could be for such an infrastructure. All these results, at the end, came to the European Union INSPIRE directive that was adopted in 2007. Let's look first into some basic definitions of what SDI is. SDI is a coordination of series of institutional and organizational agreements and policies that allow different users to access, use, process, distribute geospatial data in a very different way, today used by using modern technology in a form of spatial information services. The development of such a spatial data infrastructure and later the implementation, it's very important that it is based on standards and other agreed specifications coming from different domains. Such concepts of SDI are implemented also in the INSPIRE directive, which defines 5 main components in form of metadata, spatial data sets and services, network services, policy for data and service sharing, and also the coordination and measures for monitoring and reporting how the SDI is developing. The INSPIRE directive is a framework directive, meaning that it defines a general rules, while more specific technical provisions are actually defined in a more detailed implementing rules adopted by the European Commission and legally obliged for the implementation in the member states. Let's look into some of the INSPIRE provisions. First, INSPIRE is set up for the purpose of to support the environmental policies and other activities that might have a direct or indirect impact on the environment. The next important point is that it is not built from scratch, but it relies on the national spatial data infrastructures that are already set up in the member states and which should be set up in that way that allows the compatibility in a transboundary context. The SDIs, therefore, should be designed to ensure that the spatial data are stored, made available, and maintained at the most appropriate level, that it's possible to combine those spatial data sets coming from different sources, that it's possible to share them between different users, that it's possible to discover available spatial data sets, to also to evaluate suitability for the purpose, and to know what are the conditions for their use. In addition, INSPIRE does not require any collection of new data, but it sets specific requirements that the spatial data sets and spatial data services should be provided in an interoperable way. Interoperability is one of the key concepts of Inspire Director, which brings actually the added value as a European spatial data infrastructure to many users. Interoperability in this context of Inspire Directive means the possibility for spatial data sets to be combined and services to interact without repetitive manual intervention in an automated way, and providing also the added value to the users which are using those spatial data sets and services. The three basic technical components of the Inspire infrastructure are metadata, spatial data sets, and network services. The metadata regulation was published in December 2008, and where the member states have the obligation to create the metadata for their spatial data sets within the period of 2 and 5 years after the adoption of this implementing rule. In addition, what it is available, the more detailed technical guidelines how to set up metadata, how to provide metadata is defined. Those technical guidelines for metadata are defined in addition. And not only this, additional tools have been developed which will support the users to provide the metadata in the correct way. Those tools are metadata editor and metadata validator, which are available on the Inspire Geo portal. The next component is related to spatial data sets and to data interoperability. The European Commission regulation on data interoperability was published in 2010, and it includes and later amendment with the specific elements of the code list in 2011. It includes the common provisions, the general provisions for all spatial data teams, but the specific and additional specific provisions for Annex 1 spatial data teams. Inspire Directive defines 34 specific spatial data teams which are organized in 3 annexes. So the currently adopted regulation refers to Annex 1 teams only. The member states have the obligation to provide their spatial data sets to be compatible based on this implementing rule in the period between 2 and 7 years. What was established additionally during this development process was common consolidated UML data model for all the teams, but also additional essential technical documents that were used during the development of the data specifications and are essential for the implementation of this implementing rule. Those documents include framework documents like generic conceptual model, methodology, or rules for encoding of spatial data sets. And each team, each Inspire team, has its own technical guidelines with detailed information, examples, and explanations how to implement the technical specification. The network services. Inspire defines 5 basic network services: discovery, view, download, transformation, and invoke service. Discovery and view service regulation was published in 2009, following by download and transformation service regulation in 2010. Currently, the invoke service regulation is under development. It is foreseen to be adopted this year. Implementing rule is only one part of this big package, which is extended with specific technical guidelines for each of those individual services, and will help substantially to the implementation of the web services. In addition to these documents, a specific coordinative group with the representatives of the member states is set up, called Initial Operating Capability Task Force, which supports the member states in the implementation of the web services. 2 additional components. It is necessary to mention 2 additional components. First one, spatial data and service sharing, is dealing with the policy how to share and use and conditions for use of spatial data. The regulation was published in 2010 and provides the measures, provides the obligations that the member state sets the measures for the sharing of data and services between public authorities. that those conditions for use should be included in metadata and therefore available to every user to find them, where the main focus on the provisions to access data is on transparency and access time to be as short as possible for the data to be available to the users. In addition, this implementing rule promotes good practice experiences and sharing these good practice experiences with data sharing policy with other participants. The component of monitoring and reporting is focused on evaluating the development of INSPIRE directive at the European level and inside the member states. And the European Commission decision as the implementing rule was published in 2009. And it sets the background, the basis for the continuous monitoring of the implementation of the directive and for regular reporting. The monitoring part of this directive is more focused on the quantitative approach in a way of counting how many data sets, how many metadata, how many network services are already available for the users, while the reporting is more focused on the qualitative approach, how good those services, spatial data and services actually fit to the user's needs. Also for this implementing rule, there are more additional technical guidelines available and tools which helps the member states to provide and to report the data about the development of their national spatial data infrastructures. It's important to mention that through the development of INSPIRE process, that this process was set up as a transparent, very open, participatory approach. Now the picture on this slide doesn't represent all the experts that are actually involved in INSPIRE development. Through those years, there were really many experts from many countries, organizations and companies who participated in the INSPIRE development. But today there are almost 700 different organizations registered as INSPIRE interested participants. Those stakeholders proposed many experts to participate in different INSPIRE working groups for the development of specifications. Also, they provided a lot of reference material, identified projects, especially the European projects, participated with their outcomes and testing of INSPIRE provisions. They participated in that way to INSPIRE development process. But also other proposals that were developed through this process were tested and consulted with many stakeholders and countries. Let's look a little bit into how European Environment Agency and its partner network, EUROGI, is participating in this INSPIRE development process through all the phases from preparatory to transposition and now implementation phase. At the beginning, with strong knowledge about the environment, there was important participation to identify the environmental needs for spatial data for different analyses and for different environmental assessments. Later, this participation turned into active membership in different INSPIRE working groups, providing also reference material, use cases, and participating in different consultation processes. For instance, the direct members that participated in Annex 1 development participated in the development of hydrography and protected sites data specification. Now, Annex 3 is somehow, the teams in Annex 3 are somehow accepted as more environmental-oriented teams. Therefore, the participation of the environmental community extended in Annex 3 development process. Again, by providing reference material and user requirements, but also participating in 7 different working groups for the development of the data specifications, with bigger involvement also in the consultation process, providing comments and consultations on the draft proposals. I'm talking about Annex 3 Annexes teams. So this is the overview of 34 spatial data teams. And Annex 1, as I mentioned, the implementing rule is already adopted, while Annex 2 and 3, the development of the implementing rule is currently ongoing. The thematic working groups who were involved in this development actually concluded this development process, so the documents, the draft guidelines are already available, and they are used as a basis to prepare the draft implementing rule for these annexes 2 and 3. The European Environment Agency is moving towards the implementation of INSPIRE directive as well. So we are not participating only in the development process, but we would like to continue to implement those provisions as well. And this implementation can be seen in 3 different areas. The first one is the development of the internal EEA spatial data infrastructure, to be involved in reporting mechanisms and to providing the specific European spatial data sets, but also to support the implementation of some of the INSPIRE components and implementing rules on monitoring and reporting and on data policy. Within the EEA SDI, we set up the metadata profile based on INSPIRE and ISO standards, building the metadata catalog, which is publicly available on the EEA website for users to find spatial data. We are considering to promote the web services, and we are working on data and services sharing policy. In the reporting data flows, the EEA is involved in basically 2 different data flows. One of them are the priority data flows defined between the agency and participating countries, and others are actually data flows coming from the reporting obligations based on the European directives or international obligations. So it is important to move those selected reporting data flows, for instance, in the areas in the environmental domains like air, water, nature, and biodiversity, to be compliant with INSPIRE as well. This will force us to improve the e-reporting mechanisms, but also to provide the INSPIRE compliance of some of the pan-European spatial data sets which EEA is developing together with EUROGI partners. The further cooperation with main key players at the European level, these are DG Environment, Eurostat, and Joint Research Certain, will continue. And this will help in achieving better implementation of the monitoring and reporting and on data sharing policy as well. So for the summary, instead having islands of data of different standards and quality throughout the European countries, and constantly facing difficulties while using data because the differences in the accuracy, inconsistencies among different data sources, inconsistencies on the borders, inconsistencies between data models and vocabularies, dealing with gaps. The European legislation through INSPIRE directive sets up the general rules for the establishment of infrastructure for spatial information in the European community, which supports the environmental policy and more exact information about environment. So in few words, INSPIRE is about environment. Thank you.